Hello, and welcome along to the stream today. So, if anyone's been following along in the last few streams, I think we're up to maybe 10 or 12. What we've been concentrating on is a project that I've been working on called DevGep. Now, we have been busily working on that, and Monday night's stream was... Hello, Kim. How's it going in the chat room there? Monday night's stream was interesting in the sense that it was kind of there was very little coding done on Monday night, but we had a really good chat with Andrew Nesbitt, who has he's the creator or one of the creators of Octobox. And he has used extensively the GitHub Marketplace. Now, what we spoke about on Monday was kind of how to go about integrating with the GitHub Marketplace. And I basically picked Andrew's brain and got a lot of information from him that I think we'll be able to use in DevGep. Now, because there was a lot of information, a lot of stuff to digest, and a lot of stuff that needs to get done, and the fact that I'm out all of next week, I kind of thought there's a little point in progressing anything with DevGep in today's session, and instead I wanted to talk about this thing called the AddinDiscover project. I want to talk about it for a few reasons, but one of the main ones is it's simply amazing. It's so useful in terms of what I do as one of the maintainers of the Cake.Contrib project or the Cake.Contrib organization. So let's take a step back a second, and where I want to start is on NuGet, right? So let's go over to NuGet, and let's have a little search here for Cake, right? So Cake is the open source project, or one of the open source projects. Talking about it without Jericho, yeah. So I tried to tweet him, but I don't think I've got him on Twitter. I would love to have had him on the stream, but I think I have mentioned to him in the past I would like him to come on, but he hasn't wanted to, I don't think. So I can't force him. So I'm going to talk about him, about it, and how great it is, and hopefully he'll see this back at some point. But basically, if you go out here and search for Cake, then there are lots and lots of things in the Cake ecosystem. So if we have a look at the Cake build user, then these are all of the NuGet packages are maintained by the core Cake team. So there's 12 packages here, and those are the basis of what Cake is, right? But if we go back to that search, we'll see that there's another user out here called Cake.Contrib, right? So there's 261 packages just now associated with Cake.Contrib user on NuGet.org. Now, these are all the third-party ecosystems, utilities that go into Cake. And we, as the Cake team, love the fact that we have this kind of widespread adoption of Cake and the tools that go with it. It's great, right? But for anyone that knows me, I don't like the potential for dilution of the ecosystem, right? So what we've kind of worked on in the past, and it's documented in one of our blog posts here. Is it the announcement one? Let me find it. We created this thing called, might have been in news. Is it news? I think it's news. We created this thing called the Cake.Contrib organization, and that's twofold. So one is the Cake.Contrib organization on NuGet, and there's also a Cake.Contrib organization on GitHub. Now, the idea behind this is that when a new package is created that is intended to be consumed by lots of people within the Cake ecosystem, we would love the fact that as a default, you also add the Cake.Contrib user or Cake.Contrib organization on NuGet to that package, so that if something ever did happen to the original maintainer, then we have a mechanism to continue pushing new versions of the package as they come out. Because if we don't have kind of access to it, then we have to create a new ID. We have to push a new package ID to continue development of that. Now, there are mechanisms within inside NuGet itself, or specifically NuGet.org, to allow reserving of namespace indexes, or package prefixes as they're called. So in theory, we could reserve the cake.star namespace prefix on NuGet, and which would ultimately prevent anyone from pushing a package with cake.star in it. Now, we haven't done that for reasons, and those reasons are, at the minute, if we were to reserve that prefix and kind of make it private, then if someone attempted to push a new package with cake.star in it, what they would get back is a kind of a blanket error message that just said, you're not allowed to push to that prefix, contact the owner of the prefix. But there's no information about who the owner is, why it's reserved, all that sort of stuff. So the end user experience isn't great. The flip side of that is by leaving it open, we don't get to know about new packages that are coming out. So this is where the first part of the Cake.AddinDiscover comes in, and this is why it's great. So for the longest time, I was literally, and I'll put my hand up to this, I was genuinely just routinely searching NuGet.org for Cake, and I was scrolling through all the various add-ins, and I was trying to find when a new Cake add-in had been released. What are you saying there, Kim? And we probably just end up with them using a completely different format for the name. Absolutely, yes. So we don't necessarily want to fragment the ecosystem, but I also want to kind of have a handle on it, right? So the first part of, just to know when things are coming out, right? So the first part of what the AddinDiscover does is this thing that I was doing manually. Jericho, the creator of the AddinDiscover, has automated that process. So the output of this tool, the Cake.AddinDiscover, if we go over to the Cake Contrib home repository, which is here, then we have this audit XLSX file, or the a few markdown files. So what this audit XLSX file is doing, if I go ahead and download it, is it's searching NuGet.org for anything that starts with a cake.star, effectively, and it is adding them in. I'm going to accept that. I've literally just installed. Oh, what's all this? No, not at the minute. Let me in. Right. So the first thing that it's doing is it's automating the creation of this list. So as per Jericho's list, there are 281 add-ins that fit the cake.star prefix. Now, he has attempted to segregate some of that information as well. So anything that is kind of a recipe package, so anyone that's familiar with the Cake ecosystem will know about the concept of recipe packages, which are just NuGet packages that contain other scripts. So they're not ones that contain DLLs for the purposes of adding into Cake, but they're kind of a collection of scripts, right? Oh, yeah, that's a very good point. So if I go back to that, so the first line is a header. So it's 280, sorry, okay, 280. And he's also got a list of ones that are exempted. So these are ones that we maybe know that have not got certain things in them. They're not they're not add-ins, they're not Cake scripts, but they're also maybe not using Cake.core or Cake.com. So there may be something random. So he's kind of capturing that. And there's also the concept of deprecated ones, where ones we know what their add-ins are no longer actively maintained. So he's trying to keep the list that's in here fresh in that sense, okay? And he also goes a little bit further to say which of these add-ins reference a specific version of Cake. And the reason that we do that is that sometimes between versions of Cake there's a breaking change, and what we ask add-in authors to do is to kind of bump the Cake version up a little bit. So that's why he's kind of identifying which ones target 26, 28, and 33, because those were all the recent breaking changes. Right, so this is great for me as a person who has a little bit of OCD around these things. And one of the first things that I like to be able to look at is some of the information's over here, and it's as to whether, for example, the Cake Contrib owner has been added. Why can't I click that button? Because I need to enable editing. The first thing that I like is that he's already doing the work that I was doing manually that says whether or not the Cake Contrib user has been added to that add-in. So of that 280, as Kim pointed out, packages, we can see that 239 of those haven't been added to the Cake contrib user, or had the Cake contrib user added to them. And if we do the reciprocal, obviously, then we get that filtered list that has those 41 that haven't been added. Now, what this gives me is, when I have an opportunity, this gives me a filtered list where I can say, can you add that user? I can reach out to the owner of that package and say, can you add the Cake contrib user to it? So I'm getting there with it. So I've got 41 out of the 280 that I know about are the ones I've still got on my list to get updated. So I've been going through that process reasonably recently. So there's been it was sitting, if I go back to this list here now, then where did I have Cake contrib? Was it this one? Cake contrib, I maybe closed it. So Cake contrib was sitting around 245. So I've been able to add a few more in recently. So for me, it's kind of good because, like I say, it helps prevent the dilution of the ecosystem, right? Because it means that if we need to push a new version because something horrible's happened to the original maintainer, and we have had that happen, it means that we have a mechanism to continue doing that. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing that the Cake.AddinDiscover project is all about. And like I say, it saved me a ton of time. So from that point of view alone, it's great. I love it, right? The other thing that it helps with is, if I go back to that filter and take it out again. So let's remove that one, put everyone else back on again. Then the other project that I'm extremely interested in is Cake.recipe. So for those of you who don't know, Cake.recipe is a project, or if they live under a rock for a year, yes, that's happened too. We had a maintainer go off. I think he went off to get married, and he wasn't working on some things, and someone was wanting to update his add-ins. So I stalked him basically. I found out the Russian equivalent of Facebook. I was able to track him down by creating an account on there and sending him a message. So to avoid those situations, it's great to be able to have that initial conversation with someone when they're creating an add-in, so that we can immediately get them added into the Cake contrib organization on NuGet. And the AddinDiscover helps with that, and I'll come to why it helps with that in a second. But Cake.recipe is an attempt at normalization of builds of add-in. So for an add-in for Cake, you kind of always do the same thing over and over again. You do the compilation, you do the cleaning, you do the compilation, you do the packaging, you do the NA static analysis tests, you push to MyGet, you push to NuGet. It's kind of the same process over and over again. So we created this Cake.recipe project. Now, Cake.recipe has recently been released as 1.0.0, and you can see that in here, that some of these add-ins are using Cake.recipe 1.0.0. Now, we know for a fact, or I know for a fact, that there are breaking changes coming in the next version of Cake.recipe. Now, when we first created Cake.recipe, so let's take an example of one that is using it. So let's have a look at this project. So if I go over here to this Cake APIG and look at the source code for it, and look in the setup.cake file, then the kind of original guidance was, it's a pre-release version. You kind of want to always be on the latest pre-release. So we kind of recommended that people use Cake.recipe directly from the MyGet feed and include a pre-release version. And that's great in that initial stage of using Cake.recipe. But now that we're 1.0.0 and we know that we're going to break things in the next release, I've been hesitant to update or pull in changes to Cake.recipe because I know that there's still a lot of people using that pre-release version and things are going to break for them. So this helps me in that respect, because this is something that Jericho's added recently to this. So if I take out the people that are not using 1.0.0 and that are not using Cake.recipe, then this gives me a filtered list of 41 people that I need to go out and reach out to and say to them and make a suggestion that they pin to a specific version of Cake.recipe. So again, from a point of view of tracking these things and knowing where projects are at, this really helps me. And the other benefit is that I can then filter by this other one, which is if it's known that repository is within the Cake contrib organization on GitHub, and I say true here, then these are ones that I can send pull requests to directly, and if the maintainer isn't in a position to help out with that, I can then also do the merge and the publish as well, right? So it's phenomenally useful to be able to have all this information at the fingertips, right? So Kim's saying, I was surprised earlier that one of the add-ins I have that contains Cake.recipe wasn't detected as using Cake.recipe. So are you talking about Cake.warp, or are you talking about another one now? Because there was at least one known issue that I think... Oh, you're talking about a different one. Which one's that then? Because I think Jericho fixed one issue, Cake.codecov and Cake.transfect. So let's have a look at those. Let's have a look at these, because that's if there's an issue with it, we should probably get that. So Cake.codecov is this one. Oops. Cake.codecov is... Why can't I click on that? There it is. Cake.codecov is that one, and if we go over, it says not using Cake.recipe. Okay, so that would appear to be incorrect. Interesting. Oh, hold on. You're using your custom one for Cake.codecov. So it's not an official Cake.recipe one. So I suspect he might be filtering on where it's coming from as well. Because you did something, I can't remember what you did, but yeah, you're using your own custom version. So I suspect that's what it is. And is that the same for Transifex? Are you doing that there too? Transifex. Okay. So that one, you're kind of on your own, but you know what you're doing. So I'm assuming that this Wormy NuGets is not going to have. You're not, or are you? No, you can't, because you're putting to a specific version as well, or you were. I was going to say, are you? What's the word I'm looking for? Are you using an upstream package source to the original Cake.recipe MyGet? Are you pulling in new versions automatically, or are you only pushing when you create a new version of your own? Because if you're just pushing new versions, then I'm happy to leave you doing what you're doing, because like I say, you know what you're doing. So it's not an issue, right? So let's just see. No, I only push. Perfect. Okay, so you know what you're doing. You're doing it for a specific reason. What I'm trying to avoid are breaking people who don't know what's going on. And like I say, this spreadsheet is allowing me to narrow down that to specifically the projects that I kind of know need some work. And I'm hoping to be able to get this list, once I can get this list down to essentially 0, I want to then start breaking things in Cake.recipe. Did it to have .NET Core, and essentially that's where I want to get to. So the work that you've done in this custom feed, Kim, I'm hoping to get that pulled in sooner rather than later into Cake.recipe, but I want to get rid of this 41 and have successful working builds and publishing for them, and then we can start breaking things in Cake.recipe and get to a fully compatible .NET Core build for Cake.recipe. That's where I'm trying to get to. But I want to do it without breaking these 41 people or these 41 projects. So that's the grand scheme, and that's where we're trying to get to. But the other thing is that this AddInDiscover then starts telling me more things, right? And this is where my OCD really kicks in. So this field is telling me whether or not a particular add-in, so let's use one that is doing it. So let's go to cake.gulp. If we look at cake.gulp's new spec file, or it could be in the CS proj file as well, is that this one is using the new license expression format in NuGet. And that's the NuGet team want people to be using both the license expressions and the repository URLs, because that they then light up different links on the NuGet.org package page based on the information that's provided in those. So AddinDiscover is telling me about those things. So as I've been going through this list to get them onto Cake.recipe, I've also been updating to include them, to include that information as well. So it's not just a quick change, it's a quick change to get them onto Cake.recipe, but then it's also a change to use kind of the best practices of using the NuGet metadata. And then the final thing that I've kind of been updating is the icon URL as well. So notice the repository URL was missing .git in the URL. So that was Pascal's one. I've told him about that one, I think. So yes, he needs to go back and add .git onto the end of here. So I had a conversation with Anand, PM of the NuGet team, and his recommendation is that you include the .git in the URL for the repository. And in some packages, and that's kind of why Jericho lit up this orange one, is that the URL is there, but it doesn't have .git on the end. So again, it's having all of this in one central place is amazing, right? So the icon URL is kind of another one that's, we have a recommendation that if the Cake add-in is intended to be consumed by public and it's something, it's specifically a Cake add-in, then we like people to use the Cake contrib icon, which is this one. So again, Jericho is looking at the icon URL in the new spec to see if it matches the recommendation. If it's not, then it gets lit up here. So again, that's something else I've been looking at to fix. Now, the other one is whether or not the current add-in, let's go back the other way, whether the add-in targets the current recommended version of Cake itself. So you can see that about half of this ones that are outstanding are targeting the latest version of Cake, but there's other ones that aren't. So there's other ones that go all the way back to 16.2. So we're into the realm of the ones that are the only assumption is there if that add-in is still targeting 16.2 and it hasn't been updated, then either the maintainer has walked away from the project or it's no longer being used. But it would be good, especially since these are in the Cake contrib organization, would be good to get these updated. So this is the kind of process I'm going through and trying to get packages or add-ins updated to kind of the latest best practices, but also up to the latest version of Cake. So then the next time we do a breaking change in Cake, the process to get them updated should be really simple, because we've already gone through all the best practices. We've gone through getting it using Cake.recipe. So then the process becomes really simple. It's a quick pull request, it's a quick update, and then it's a quick release. But getting everyone kind of on that level playing field is kind of where I'm striving to get to. But I'm trying to also limit the scope of what I'm doing each time. So the initial scope is just to get everyone on Cake.recipe and the best practices. If I can then update them to use the latest version of Cake and so on, then that's a kind of a for the win. But ideally, I mean, where I would love to get to, I would love to get to the point where let's bring up all the filters. Let's turn off all the filters. I would love to be at a point where it's all greens across the board in terms of all of these things. Everyone's on the latest version of Cake. Everyone's referencing the right version of the common assemblies. Everyone's targeting the recommended net standard 2. Everyone's using the right icon. Transfer to Cake contrib is not an essential one. That's one that I'd be quite happy for them. There's still to be reds in there, but all using the right license type, all using the right repository, all using the Cake contrib user and NuGet. If I could get to a point where that's greens across the board for all of those, I would be a happy person, right? But obviously, it's quite a diverse ecosystem, and bringing everyone to the same page is going to take time, right? Isn't a recommendation to both reference net standard and... So it depends. Or in my mind, it depends. So the question from Kim there is regarding this column here and what framework you're targeting. If you're targeting if you're creating a brand new add-in, then I would argue that just targeting net standard 2 is probably the way to go. Because, yeah, but why? It's that old adage of how many versions of old versions of things do you support. If you are creating a brand new add-in today, then I would recommend probably just targeting net standard 2.0. If you are in a situation like this add-in, where you have an existing version that is using net 4.6, then updating that add-in, I would probably cross-compile to both net 4.6 and net standard 2. So that you're getting the best of both worlds. But then at some point, you might want to deprecate that 4.6. Different people have different opinions. But that may cause problems if you're using .NET version and user isn't. Oh, absolutely. There are definitely known problems with that. So what you're kind of pointing out there is that although net standard 2 says it runs on 4.6x, there are known issues that are only resolved if that person updates to having .NET Framework 4.7.1 installed. But, I mean, there's only so much we can do. Okay, so I'm not going to try and enforce that add-in creators do both. I'm going to say that, like I say, going forward, the recommendation is net standard 2, on the caveat that it might not work unless you're on 4.7.1. But yeah, that's kind of where I sit on that one. Guidelines, where are you copying and pasting that from? As .NET Framework 4.7.2 has issues rolling that standard assemblies, and Cake itself can run on .NET Framework, blah blah blah. To have the maximum. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with any of that. But that's a guideline. We can't enforce anything. So you're reading from this one. Yes, it's a guideline to have maximum compatibility. But if you're a brand new add-in author and you're already using 4.7.1 and you're on the latest version of Cake, then you as the add-in author really only care about net standard 2. So it's a little bit of a stretch to ask people to do both. But if they're willing to do both, I'm happy for them to do both. Well, and I don't argue with that either. And this is where the kind of how far do we go as a Cake contrib organization? I know what I can make a recommendation of, and I know what I would like to have, but I also know that some of these add-ins are maintained by people that are happily doing their own thing. So there's only so much that we as the Cake contrib organization can do. I would love to have greens across the board, but I know I'm probably never going to get to there. And if I can say that it has support at least for the latest version of net standard 2, then I'm okay with that one. This one I'm less happy about because, well, it'll only work on full fat framework. It won't run on .NET Core. So in my mind, that's the bigger problem as opposed to not supporting an older technology. So it's a difficult one. Well, not unless you take control. I mean, I could certainly try that, but I would literally then do nothing else because there's, what did we say, 280 add-ins? That's a lot of add-ins to maintain. I don't necessarily want to have to do that. But I have it in my head that I want to try and get to a point where all of these are updated to at least the latest version of Cake. That's kind of my overall mission at the minute, but I also don't want to own them. I don't want to be the person who is updating all of them. I've already had a commitment from Jamie Phillips and Rodney Littles, who are going to help out with getting some of these ones that are updated. And I know, Kim, you're already updating your own ones, so I don't necessarily need to worry about your ones. And there are other active maintainers that are doing a great job in bringing those add-ins up to date. But it's a question over what we do with the ones that are known to not being maintained. So the really problematic ones is if we order by this again. What's that one? 064? Oh my goodness. I shudder to think what's in that one. Let's do it the other way. So some of these ones that are really early versions of Cake, and the ones that are not in the Cake contrib organization, those are the ones that I really struggle with, because there's very little I can do about them. Without forking the repository into the Cake contrib organization, I can't send a PR in because it's clear that they're not going to be updated. So I have reached out directly to some of the maintainers behind these projects through the NuGet.org contact maintainers list or email form, and I have had some feedback back, but the majority of them the emails never get replied to. So there's some on here that I know are never going to get updated, but maybe that's okay because they're no longer being used. But there are other ones on here that I know are being used and are by maintainers I have been in contact with, so I'm hoping to be able to pull them into the Cake contrib organization so that other maintainers can then help out with them. So that's kind of where I'm hoping to get to, right? And this is what this spreadsheet gives me into one kind of central place. It gives me all of that information in one place. Now, the other thing that the AddInDiscover does for us automatically, and this is another thing that I used to do manually, or we used to ask maintainers to do manually, is that this list of add-ins that we have on the Cake website here, this is driven by a set of YAML files in the repository. So if we go over to here and look at the Cake build website, we go over here and have a look at this, then we look at add-ins and we look at these YAML files. These YAML files were manually maintained before, but what Jericho has created now, and you'll see a couple of open pull requests, is that the AddInDiscover is automatically updating and adding those when they come in. So this one, for example, this one was a pull request that the AddInDiscover added because it found a new add-in on NuGet.org. So this was a really interesting one because Cake.AddinDiscover already exists. So I did a little search here and I went to Cake.AddinDiscover and it's already there, right? It's already there and it has the Cake contrib user associated with it. But this is Alistair Chapman, one of the other maintainers of the Cake project. Now, he hasn't been in a position to update this for a while. So what this person did, I'm going to say Luke, he created his own version of it. Now, that is an exact case of the dilution of the ecosystem. So what I did was I reached out to the owner of this one, and what I said was it would probably be better if we don't duplicate the effort and we instead have both of you working on it in a single repository. So that ended up with me reaching out to Luke, and he's now a member of Lucas, he's now a member of the Cake contrib organization. He has full access to the NSWAG repository that Alistair has moved into here, and the hope is that he hasn't done it yet. The hope is that Lucas will take all the work that he did to get the new version created, and he'll pull it into this one. So we don't have that dilution of the ecosystem. We'll then be able to go to that NuGet package, the CodeGen NuGet package, unlist it so that it's clear that it's not being used anymore, and it helps with that. But the AddInDiscover helped me identify that was happening. Without the AddInDiscover, I might not have found that. Okay. Yes, absolutely, Kim. So Kim's saying there that we'd be able to deprecate the other one in favor of the existing one. So that's something that NuGet.org is adding support in for, like true support of deprecation. So we would absolutely be able to take advantage of that, yes. So that's one of the things that the AddInDiscover is doing. So it updates, it adds and it deletes YAML files. So if there's a YAML file for an add-in that's maybe been unlisted or it can't be found anymore, then it will remove it from the website as well automatically. Now, it doesn't merge those automatically, but it does raise them, and then obviously someone in the Cake team would be able to review them. Now, the reason I haven't reviewed those ones is because of that situation, because this one here was adding one that I probably didn't actually want it to be added in. So the way that Jericho has made the AddInDiscover work is that it won't submit more pull requests until the existing ones have been tidied up. So either closed or merged, it won't create another pull request on the way. Okay? So that's what that is. And the other thing that it does, which is really useful for me once we get things running with it. What about one for updating? Okay, so maybe there was a reason that I haven't done that one yet as well. Let me not lie. Let me check it. Build website. What was the reason for that? Was it this one? Or maybe it was one that was closed and brought back up. Let me see. There was some discussion around this. And there was some discussion about what the pre-release tag actually meant. So originally the pre-release tag was literally, is it the latest version of the NuGet package for this add-in? Is it a pre-release or is it not? The usefulness of this tag, I have a question over whether this tag's even useful. I see this YAML file kind of being, does it exist at all, as opposed to trying to give information about whether it's a pre-release version or whether it's not. So there was some discussion around what we're going to do with that. There's other things happening here where this repository has changed. So it's gone away from github.com to being NuGet.org. Now that concerns me because that would suggest that potentially the repository has gone away. And is that what's happened in this scenario? No, it's still there. So there's a question mark over why that's happened, right? But I think that's driven by what's been added into the new spec. So there's lots of things in here that provide discussion. But yes, ultimately this one needs to get reviewed and pulled in. So I will be doing that at some point. I'll probably go through this properly, not on the stream, and make some suggestions or make some bring some ideas to the table, because this one doesn't make sense to me at all, unless that person has actually created that. Oh, they have. Look at that. So that would suggest interesting. Some questions for Jericho and how that works. Useful if the versions available is only a pre-release. Maybes, yes. But that would be... But like that one, I don't know whether that... nowhere on the website do we indicate what that pre-release flag means, I don't think. So there's different interpretations of it. So if there's ambiguity, it's not very useful at the minute, in my opinion. And I think that's exactly what it is. It is the project URL specified in the NuGet package. But then this might, once we get all the packages, or once we get to a point where all the add-ins are using a repository URL, then if this is what this is actually intended for, then we could have a repository URL and a project URL. And when they're the same, only show one. But that's kind of future. So yeah, that's what the AddInDiscover is doing. The other thing that it's doing, if we go up to here and look at Cake.recipe. So because Cake.recipe is used by a bunch of different projects, Jericho's also updated the AddInDiscover to inform Cake.recipe when there are new versions of its dependencies. So if it finds a a new version of Fixie, or in this example, a new version of the Fixie reference, or a new version of one of the add-ins that's used that is compatible with the current version that Cake.recipe is being compiled against, then it will send in some pull requests. So these are all sitting open at the minute, the Cake Contra bot ones, because of those potential breaking changes that we know about. So we can't go to Cake.33 at the minute because there was a change in something. I can't remember what it was. But currently, Cake.recipe will only work on 32.1. So all of these are sitting open, or most of these are sitting open, because they have some sort of breaking change. And I don't want to do any of those until we get to that point where we've got those 41 all updated. So AddinDiscover is doing all of that for us. What else is it doing? So it lists what the best practices are in terms of your add-ins. It talks about what is automated and what it does. So we add in report we spoke about, the synchronizing of the YAML files for the website. It updates the Cake.recipe dependencies, and it upgrades or the references, and then the version of Cake used by Cake.recipe. So it's handling all of that work for us and making suggestions via pull requests, how that stuff works. I suggest you close the PR for CodeCov. It should be updated to the latest 171 only after Cake. So hold on, let me go back and do that properly. So Cake.CodeCov, this one. Update Cake. I suggest you close the PR for CodeCov. It should be updated to the latest 171 and only after Cake.CodeCov is updated first. Oh, I see what you're saying. So is there one in here for Cake.CodeCov? No, not yet. So let's copy this. Copy. Or have you already said this? You probably already said this. There is no benefit for Cake.recipe to update CodeCov packages to 5.1. Blah, blah, blah. To get any benefit, see 366. So 366. I see. Okay. So I'm going to say close. As per suggestion both here and on Twitch stream, going to go ahead and close this one. Okay. So the other thing that I was saying was automated is that it will update the Cake.recipe dependencies and references, but it'll also make some suggestions about when there's a new version of Cake that it could use. So like again, if there's a breaking change to Cake, it can make a pull request in to Cake.recipe, and that's what we were seeing with the highest PR there. So this is suggesting to update Cake to 33.0, but we're holding off on that one yet. But it's also handling lots of things here. So it knows about the structure of Cake.recipe. It knows about where all the dependencies are. So it kind of has that information. So it's kind of doing something similar to what Dependabot does to an extent, but it's also doing it specifically for how some of the Cake add-ins work. So it's a really useful tool. And like I say, in terms of helping with my OCD about certain things and the manual effort that I was doing anyway, it's kind of invaluable. And if I go back to Cake Contrib here, I recently deleted a file. So if I go up to here and look this one here, previously all of the work that's in that audit XLSX file and also the audit markdown files, I was doing that manually here in this thing I had called the status.md file, and it was a nightmare to keep up to date because it meant lots of manual edits, jumping around, figuring out where things were. All of that work has been taken away from me, and it's literally here now. And we also get this really cool picture that shows how we're progressing So this one here, the red one, is the one that there's been a bit of an uptick lately in the last few weeks when I've been kind of pushing this a little bit. But obviously, ideally, this would get to at least where the existing Cake versions are, but also, obviously, I'd want this line to get to 100%. That's the ultimate goal. Whether we get there or not, we'll have to wait and see, right? But this is kind of a call to action as well. If there are any 110% sure. If there are any Cake maintainers out there or Cake contrib maintainers out there who are interested in helping with this, in bringing add-ins up to date. I mean, I know that Sean, Gitfool, he went through a process of getting. So what he did, he kind of went the other way. He went to NuGet.org and he searched for Cake, and then he looked at Cake contrib, and he then said, what are the 10 most popular add-ins and then what are the 10 most popular add-ins that aren't targeting the latest version of Cake? And he sent pull requests into all those repositories to get them updated. So he kind of went through the process, and that was really like the file helpers one, JSON one, all of those are updated to the latest version of Cake because of the work that Sean did. So if you are so inclined and you have some spare time, I would personally love it if you can help get some of these add-ins updated. I've kind of said how I'm walking through them. I'm kind of targeting the ones that are still on an older version of Cake.recipe, and I'll be pulling them up to the latest version of Cake as I'm going through a PR. But if you are interested, I would encourage you to take a look at this audit report and jump in and help out. Yeah, there's not much else to say there apart from it would be great if you could. So, if you're in communication with any add-in authors that don't know about things like the Cake contrib organization, both on NuGet and GitHub, I would encourage you again to reach out to them and bring them into the fold, if nothing else. Kim saying, in other words, everyone get to work. Sure, let's put it that way. Because, like I say, if we know it was 280, so let's take out the 33. So where's 33? Oh, we'll take up the ones that are past that, right? So there are 129 add-ins that aren't on the current recommended. They're not currently at the recommended version of Cake. So we are over halfway there, but it would be great to see some of these updated. So some of them, there's a ton of them on just the next oldest one. So in theory, these ones should be relatively simple to get updated and get new versions pushed out. And if those ones are in the Cake contrib organization, some of them doesn't look like they are. If they are in the Cake contrib organization and the maintainer's not able to do the work, then there's definitely people within the organization who can review and get those PRs merged. So yeah, feel free to jump in if you're so inclined. I personally would very much appreciate it. But I think that's all I had for today. Like I said, I just wanted to highlight this tool and give credit to Jericho for the work that he's done, because yeah, it's kind of amazing what he's done. Bear with me one sec. Yeah, so that's kind of all I had for today. I mentioned at the top of the show that I won't have a stream next week. I'm away for a week. We're away on holiday, so there won't be one on Monday or Friday next week. But the following Monday I should be back, and hopefully working back on the DevGet project. I'm hoping to bring Matthias on to the stream at some point soon to kind of start putting the final pieces together, ready for release, hopefully. But there's still some tidy up work that needs to be done and consolidation of what we're doing. So that's where I'm trying to get to with that. But like I say, from an open source point of view, my focus at the minute is on getting Cake.recipe updated. And once that's done, I'll be able to remove some of that psychic weight that builds up on open source maintainers' shoulders when there's things out there that aren't quite right. So that's where I'm trying to get to. So I'll leave you with, like I say, that call to action. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to reach out. I'll certainly be able to help out in any way I can. But for now, that's all I have. So thank you very much for coming along, and I will see you back here a week on Monday. Thank you very much. Talk to you later.